right. It's just you and me today. This is the first ever solo episode of the Unmeasured podcast. We just keep having firsts here, which is so fun. Something to know about me, which maybe you share. Maybe you share this trait with me. I often think in song lyrics. So I'll be in the middle of a conversation with someone and they'll say something and it makes me think of a song. And before I get really comfortable with a person or in the situation, I'll keep the song lyrics inside. But as I get more and more comfortable with someone or in a situation, the song lyrics start to come out. So when I kicked off this episode, I started singing I'm your baby tonight in my head. And now that I just sang it out loud to you, it's making me feel like I might be getting in the flow here with the podcast. I might be starting to feel comfortable. I'm finding my voice. And the more that I sing on here, the more sorry we're all going to be that someone gave me a microphone. All right, let's get down to business. Which definitely makes me think of the, is it Mulan? Let's get down to business. All right. We are talking about inner critic today, which means we are talking about self-compassion. Got an amazing question from a member of our Unmeasured podcast community. And her question reads, my inner critic is horrible to me, and she is so loud. Any tips for shutting down this mean girl voice inside? Love this question. Love talking about our inner dialogue. I love talking about inner critic stuff. And one of the reasons why I love talking about inner critic stuff so much is because anytime we talk about inner critic, we are also talking about self-compassion, and self-compassion is one of my favorite things to explore. It's been an absolutely game-changing, life-changing practice for me. Self-compassion has supported so many different areas of my life, so many different areas of healing, so many different areas of growth for me, from healing my relationship with food through intuitive eating, strong self-compassion there, healing my relationship with movement through creating a more joy-filled and intuitive relationship with movement, super strong self-compassion component there. My relationship with the coping mechanism of perfection, huge need for self-compassion there. Motherhood, hello. It's like the mother load of self-compassion. You name it, I have needed self-compassion. Yeah, there's not an area of my life I'm like, whoa, marriage, friendship, anxiety, body image, self-compassion is there and present. And that's because inner critic was there and present. And so I'm really excited to share with you today how I love to approach this topic with myself, my tried and true approach for this, and how I love to support my clients, the women that I get to work with in private coaching and mentorship, and also how I love to support our unmeasured movement community inside the Unmeasured Movement membership with self-compassion. It is one of the 4 C's of our Unmeasured Movement membership. And so, as you can tell, this is a topic that I'm very passionate about compassion. And I really think that that is how we move forward through inner critic. So the first thing that I would really encourage you to do, if you feel like you have this really strong inner critic, or even if you're like, yeah, my inner critic isn't super strong, but she shows up, and I don't like it when she does, and it doesn't feel good when she's berating me inside my mind. The first thing that I would really encourage you to do is take pen to paper, or if you're not someone who likes to write things down, do your version of creating a really deep level of self-awareness around your inner critic and write down, like, what is your inner critic saying to you? And people seem to want to rush past awareness, right? Like, we want a solution. It's like, I don't want to write down what my inner critic is saying. I want you to tell me how to get rid of my inner critic. I promise you that the awareness piece of this puzzle is so huge. You are proactively working towards having a more compassionate inner dialogue with yourself when you are willing to slow down, get present with yourself, and actually really hear what your inner critic is saying and get really aware of what is happening here, right? So pen to paper or whatever your version of that is, start to notice, like maybe over the course of a week, write down what your inner critic is saying, right? Maybe it's around your relationship with food or movement or body image or motherhood or career. I'm just naming, I'm just rattling off a couple of places where my inner critic, has shown up really loud and strong in the past and in the present. And write down what your inner critic is saying. I will happily share with you something that my inner critic says to me on repeat. You did something wrong, and that person is mad at you. This is probably the thing that my inner critic has said to me more often than anything else in my life. And because I'm not paying you to be my therapist, I'm not gonna, open up the whole like past history, whatever, of why this is my strongest inner critic story. But I can tell you that this has been something that my inner critic has been saying to me since childhood, at like my adolescent years, my teenage years. Whoa. I mean, no one could pay me to go back to like freshman or sophomore year of high school. There's no amount of money that you could pay me that would, I would agree to go back to that time in my life. Super strong inner critic during that time. Also heard the inner critic really loud again, in college. And it started to tell me lies like, if you can just, this is really when like the perfectionism started to like super strong creep in. If you can just make yourself perfect, then you'll never do anything wrong and no one will ever be mad at you. And so then I started attaching to anything that I could to try to be perfect, right? And so my body, trying to control my body through food and exercise became a huge coping mechanism for me to try to cope with this really painful story that I was hearing inside that was being narrated by my inner critic of, hey, you did something wrong and now people are mad at you. And the real fear underneath people being mad at me is a fear of rejection, a fear of abandonment for not being enough, right? Like, you're not enough. People are going to reject you. People are going to make fun of you. People are going to shame you. People are going to leave you. People are not going to want you. Like, so all these things are so interconnected, right? And so I'm just sharing with you my inner critic's strongest story, because as you are bringing awareness to what your inner critic is saying, or as this, wonderful person shared in the question that she submitted, what your inner mean girl is saying, call this part of you whatever you want. But this really like self-critical inner voice that you are hearing, there are going to be themes. And this is something that I think is really cool about bringing awareness to your inner critic over a period of time, right? Why I'm not just like, well, what did your inner critic say to you in this moment right now? Look at what your inner critic says to you over a week, 2 weeks, a month, and start to write it down. And you are going to start to see themes. And these themes hold amazing opportunities for healing. These themes hold amazing opportunities for shifting things for yourself. And I know that that's been true for me. And I can say without a doubt that it has been true for the incredible women who I have the joy and the opportunity to work with. So, first thing, awareness. Do not skip. Do not skip this step. Do not skip this step. I cannot stress enough how important this step is and how unfun and unsexy this step is. Like, don't we just all want a quick fix? As an aside to wanting a quick fix, this is one of the reasons why diet culture can be such a strong pull for us as a solution to all of our problems. Because diet culture sells us a quick fix, right? Diet culture is all about a quick fix. And many of us, dare I say all of us as human beings on this planet, are walking around with a story that is being narrated that hits at like a core wound or a deep human fear, right? Like the fear of not being enough, the fear of being rejected, the fear of not being loved, whatever it might be. And our inner critic theme can help us to get to what that is. And I'll explain to you a little bit more here in a moment about how we can tap in to what that, deeper fear might be. But diet culture comes along and it's like, hey, eat this, not that. And all of your problems are going to go away. It's like, okay, yeah, that sounds great to me. I've been dealing with, anxiety that I did something wrong and people are mad at me for like almost my whole life. But you're telling me if I eat this, not that, and I can, make my body look a certain way, that everything's like going to get better. Amazing. So we can see how manipulative the messages around diet culture are. Like it makes us feel like this is something that we can control and that the solution is, like relatively easy. So I just wanted to throw that little nugget in to notice how your coping mechanisms to deal with the story that your inner critic is telling you, how it makes us, we are sort of fed this solution. I would call it a solution, sitting on a throne of lies, but we're fed this solution where it's like, okay, yeah, this is going to fix it. Like, of course we want to fix it. Of course we don't want to feel this way. And if we can just control our way out of this, like, sign us up. But the truth is that the path forward is not a path of control. It is a path of connection. And we are going to trade control for connection. And it's also why a lot of what I see as the more mainstream advice around like shutting up our inner critic, I don't think is actually like long-term, like is actually like a long-term solution for this, right? It's like trying to control this part of you. I am yet to see that be an effective solution for this problem that, so many people feel like I have this problem of this inner critic. I'm yet to see these more like controlling mechanisms be a truly like healing solution. If it has been for you, that's amazing. And if it hasn't been, then I have something else to share with you today. So that's amazing. And if you've already found your solution, then you probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast episode anyways, right? Okay. So awareness, step one, look at what your inner critic is saying to you and see what themes start to pop up. Step two, we are actually going to engage with our inner critic because if I may point out, this is part of you, right? It might be a part of you that's saying things that don't feel very good, or it might be a part of you where you're like, wow, I feel awful every time you talk to me. Totally valid for you to not necessarily like this part of you. But what I would love for you to do is attempt to see this voice as a really important part of you who is so desperate for connection. Have you ever seen a kid or have you ever seen an adult almost like lash out because their needs are not being met and they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm lashing out because everything I've tried up until this point has not worked. And now, like, I really want to get your attention. I mean, this happens oftentimes, right, with like toddlers and young kids, but it happens with adults. I mean, I bet you can think of a moment where you have done an adult version of lashing out because you do not feel heard. I can also think of moments where I have done that, right? So we can think about this inner critic as a voice that has developed over the course of, perhaps many years, maybe many decades. And this part of you is like, I am lashing out because no one is hearing me. And I am getting louder and louder because I don't feel heard. So, what we want to do is we want to create connection with this part of you and hear this part of you and really understand like what is driving this part of you. And I love to do this through questions. We are trading control for connection. And we all know that our inner critic is super judgmental. So we're going to trade judgment for curiosity. And I think curiosity is one beautiful way of creating connection. Not the only way, but is one very powerful way. And so asking that part of yourself, and you can do this through journaling or just, in a quiet moment with yourself, saying to that part of yourself, I hear you. I'm listening. What are you afraid of? Ask that part of yourself, what are you afraid of? What um what do you desire? What are you trying to protect me from? And these questions honor the positive intention beneath our inner critic. And I truly do believe that there is a positive intention underneath there. This is not me justifying the things that our inner critic says. But I do believe that there is a positive intention underneath there. And I do believe that when we are willing to understand what that positive intention might be, it helps us to think about our inner critic differently. And it helps us to think about our inner critic in a way that allows us to actually like move forward more open, creating space for that voice of self-compassion. What I have often found is that the inner critic really shows up as a way to protect our inner child from the thing that we are most afraid of. And so I really like to think about just for me personally, three sort of um, key parts of myself here: my inner critic, my inner child, and then what I like to refer to as my inner mother, which is that voice of self-compassion. You can think about these parts of yourself however you want to, whatever way is productive. But you know, my inner critic is like, I'm trying to keep you from being rejected. I'm trying to keep you from being abandoned. I'm trying to keep you from like other people seeing the other people thinking that you're not enough. And if I can be so intense, if I can be so harsh, if I can be so critical to help you to see what you might be doing wrong so that you can make yourself so perfect that you never do anything wrong and you never make anyone mad, then you're never going to have to experience that rejection. You're never going to have to experience that abandonment. You're never going to have to experience that feeling of not enoughness. And guess what? My inner child wants, like more than anything, to feel enough, to feel loved, to feel like I belong, right? And so the inner critic kind of develops as this way of trying to make those things happen, albeit it doesn't work. It doesn't work in a productive way. I'm sure there have been times where my inner critic has almost like forced me into, or has sort of like forced me into these coping mechanisms of people pleasing and perfectionism to try to avoid moments of discomfort, but at what cost? Now that we have awareness about our inner critic, now that we are hearing our inner critic, now that we are understanding the positive intention beneath the inner critic, now that we're understanding deep down, what do we fear? What do we desire? And what is our inner critic trying to protect us from? We have this beautiful opportunity to bring in self-compassion. Dr. Kristen Neff is the incredible leading expert on self-compassion. And so I definitely recommend, looking into her work. But she notes these 3 different components of self-compassion. So Dr. Kristen Neff says that self-compassion has these 3 components. Common humanity, right? So like, I'm not alone in this experience, common humanity. Mindfulness. So really bringing awareness to what you're experiencing without like over identifying with it, without making it your identity. And then kindness. So these are the 3 components, mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness. I love to think of my voice of self-compassion as being this very honest, loving, strong, wise inner voice. So my voice of self-compassion, your voice of self-compassion will never lie to you. Okay. It's honest, but it is strong and it is loving and it is wise. And there is one other thing that I want to point out about our inner critic versus our voice of self-compassion. Our inner critic loves to simplify things to the point where there is no room for nuance. Because our inner critic is responding to our inner child, right? Like it's very childlike. It's like, you did something wrong, someone's mad at you. It's very, very, very like overly simplified. And our voice of self-compassion can hold space for the nuance and has this incredibly strong, like emotional maturity to hold the both and. So I love thinking about this voice as being emotionally mature, as being very regulated, and as being able to hold space for the nuance, to be able to hold space for the both and. Okay. Thinking about the voice in that way, this is why I love to call her my inner mother. And because she gets to offer the inner child like the love that my inner child needs and gets to really see and hear and hold space for the inner child while still being the one who is driving the process, by still being the one who is moving us forward from that really wise place. All like, everyone's coming along for the ride. Everyone gets to be heard. Everyone gets to be seen. But not everyone not everyone is the wise adult in the room. And the voice of self-compassion gets to be that. So I have found it to be very helpful to do some script writing around self-compassion. So because you've done the beautiful work of bringing awareness to where your inner critic is showing up, and you've, noted the situations, you've noted the themes, you have then been curious with yourself, like, what are the biggest fears here? What are the biggest desires here? What are you trying to protect me from? Um, you can then practice in a non-elevated moment, right? So practice getting in touch with your voice of compassion. Practice getting in touch with that voice of self-compassion, getting in touch with that wise, honest, loving inner voice in a moment where your inner critic is not, getting super loud. The louder our inner critic, the bigger the opportunity there is for a strong voice of self-compassion, okay? But also, the more that you really hear that inner critic, the less that it is gonna have to scream at you. So, love to practice connecting with that voice of self-compassion in a moment that is not so heightened with emotion. And so let's say that an example of when your inner critic gets really loud, maybe you try on a pair of pants that fit last winter. You put them on and they no longer fit comfortably. You can tell that they are feeling, way tighter than they were last year. And so you feel your inner critic getting really, really loud. Like, let's use my inner critic example of you did something wrong. You did something wrong. And now people aren't going to love you. You did something wrong and now people are going to judge you. You did something wrong, whatever it might be. Okay. So you start to hear this inner critic voice. And so maybe you write that down, right? The scenario is pants feeling tight. Inner critic says this. Okay. What are you afraid of, inner critic? Inner critic is afraid of rejection. What do you desire? To feel loved. Okay. What are you trying to protect me from? The judgment of others and feeling the pain or discomfort of rejection. Great. So we're really clear on that. Now, what might the voice of self-compassion say here? Remembering that self-compassion has these components: common humanity, mindfulness, and kindness. Okay. So the voice of self-compassion might say, mindfulness. What am I feeling right now? When I tried to put my pants on and they were feeling tight, I felt incredibly uncomfortable. And I felt like I had done something wrong. I felt like I had failed in some way. So we look at, what am I making this mean about me in that moment? Okay. I feel uncomfortable. My chest feels tight. I I am wanting to fix this because I feel like I've done something wrong, and I'm making it mean that I have failed in some way. That's mindfulness. Common humanity comes in this moment and says, because of diet culture messaging around our bodies, this is an experience of putting on pants that used to fit and no longer fit that can feel really triggering and uncomfortable because of that diet culture messaging. You're not alone in this feeling. This is something that many, many people feel and experience because of diet culture lies. Okay, so that common humanity, you're not alone in this discomfort. And then bringing in that kindness. So I love to ask, what else could this mean that would feel more empowering? What else might be true here? And the kindness says that bodies are made to change. It is okay for our bodies to change. Bodies are not meant to stay stagnant. There is not only one body that is good and okay. Body changes do not mean that I've done anything wrong or that I failed. In fact, it can mean that I've been nourishing my body more. It can mean that my body's been supporting me through a challenging time. It can mean that I have actually been enjoying my life more and feeling more present and experiencing more pleasure and living more fully. So, bringing in that kindness here and that wise, strong inner mother, reminding you that Nothing that your body does or doesn't do determines how enough you are or how lovable you are. You are enough. You are lovable. And no matter what happens with your body's shape or size, you are deserving of care and respect. And so we can see here that by really this self-compassion voice holds space for the both and it brings in nuance. And you can practice writing down these scripts and like getting comfortable with this voice, getting more and more tuned into this voice. You have self-compassion within you. You absolutely have self-compassion within you. And this voice needs practice to feel stronger and stronger and stronger. And so these journaling prompts can really help you to strengthen that voice of self-compassion. I know that we all want a quick fix. And that is why things like diet culture can feel so enticing because it's like, oh my gosh, I want a quick fix for this inner critic that is not feeling like supportive, is not feeling good, right? Like we want a quick fix for that. I fully honor all of our desires for a quick fix. And what I can tell you is that spending the time connecting deeply with yourself and cultivating this voice of self-compassion. This is a gift that you are giving yourself for a lifetime. There is not a single situation that your future self is going to encounter where this voice of self-compassion will not be an asset to you. There are so many benefits of self-compassion. There is so much research that supports the benefits of self-compassion. You can look up Dr. Kristen Neff's incredible work and the research tied to her work. Like it is truly remarkable what is unlocked for us when we practice this self-compassion. And I just want to say that you putting in the effort with yourself now, you are worth this effort. And there is not a single situation that you will encounter now and forever and ever moving forward into the future where this is not going to serve you. This will serve you in every future situation that you encounter. Your future self will thank you immensely. And it's not about perfecting the voice of self-compassion. It's not about never hearing your inner critic. I have personally been doing self-compassion work for so many years, and my voice of self-compassion is incredibly strong. My inner critic, my inner critic is much quieter now, but I still hear my inner critic, regularly. It's just my inner critic is not calling the shots. My inner critic is not holding me back. My inner critic is not deciding like how I do and do not show up in my life. And my inner critic is not, taking me down for days or weeks or months. I hear that part of myself. I hold space for that part of myself. I listen to that part of myself. I honor the fears and the desires of that part of myself because those fears and those desires are me. Those are my fears. Those are my desires. And I then speak to myself, my whole self, with that voice of self-compassion. And I allow that to be what moves me forward and what supports me in the actions that I take next. So please know that while self-compassion is not a quick fix, it is a beautiful, meaningful, fulfilling journey for you to walk with yourself that is truly going to help to create, to support, to create the deep connection with yourself, the deep trust with yourself that is going to unlock so much beauty for you in your life that you are so deserving of.